Hello, thanks everybody for joining us today for this virtual brown bag on the Department of Homeland Security Office of Academic Engagement. This is Steve Springer. I'm Director of Regulatory Practice Liaison here at NAFSA. I just want to make a couple of quick announcements before we get started. As you see on the screen, remember that you will have to call in. You'll have to dial this telephone number to get audio. We will accept questions. We look forward to having your questions through the chat box. So type in your questions. We'll be watching those as the presentation goes along. And we will post the slides on the NAFSA website after this event. We're also recording it, and we will post the recording later. So watch the NAFSA website for those. And with that, I'll turn it over to NAFSA's Executive Director and CEO, Marlene Johnson, to introduce our guest speaker today.
Great. Thank you, Steve. And hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're very pleased to have this opportunity to have the Department of Homeland Security Office of Academic Engagement with us. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Lauren Kielsmeyer, who serves as the Executive Director of the Academic Engagement at the Department of Homeland Security. She works across DHS and its partner agencies to build and leverage relationships with the academic community to support DHS's key mission areas. Previously, Lauren was Chief of Staff for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services from 2009 to 2011. She came to DHS from Arizona, where she served in senior policy and management roles, including serving as the governor's education policy advisor. Prior to her work in government, Lauren served in senior management roles in both the corporate and not-for-profit sectors. As Lauren will explain during her presentation, one of her many responsibilities is coordinating the work of the Homeland Security Academic Advisory Council. We call it HSAAC. I've had the pleasure of working closely with Lauren in my role as co-chair of the International Students Subcommittee of HSAAC. And I've been impressed with this and the other valuable work that she and her colleagues in the Office of Academic Engagement are doing for our community. So I wanted you to meet her virtually in this case and hear more about her important work. Thank you so much for joining us, Lauren.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for that kind introduction and for providing the forum for us today to discuss the Office of Academic Engagement. I'll note that as OAE, and we'll get into some acronyms shortly. I'm pleased to join all of you today and hope you find the presentation useful. Following my remarks, we'll have about 20 minutes for open discussion, and I welcome any questions you have. Just one other quick acronym I'll mention at the start. The Homeland Security Academic Advisory Council, I'll call the HSAAC for ease of use. So let's start first, we can go to slide 2, with an overview of OAE, who we are, where we sit within the department, and how we work specifically with the international student community. OAE was established in 2011 to support the department's mission by building, improving, and leveraging relationships with the academic community. And this is the first time in the history DHS created an organization functioning at the headquarters level to look out across the more than 20 component agencies that make up the department to develop strategy, increase coordination, and focus efforts to develop a stronger relationship with you all in the academic community. And one of the first things we did in 2011 was conduct an analysis of the department's primary touch points with the academic community. With such a large and expansive agency, you can imagine that many DHS offices interact with colleges and universities. From that analysis and through discussions with DHS staff members, we narrowed our primary operational areas to 5 areas of focus: international students being one, then campus resilience, Homeland Security academic programs, academic research and faculty exchange, and student and recent graduate recruitment. Across each of these areas, we work throughout DHS and with our interagency partners, such as Departments of State, Justice, and Education, to increase coordination, lead department-wide initiatives, consolidate and promote resources, and identify opportunities to collaborate in our shared mission space. So our role is not intended to be operational. We allow the staff within DHS components such as ICE or USCIS to do their work while finding ways to support them internally and externally. So for today's presentation, I want to focus on our role with international students and the work we do to help advance opportunities for them to study here while maintaining the integrity of the immigration process. We can go to the next slide. Okay. So as you know, 3 agencies, or components as we call them within DHS, are primarily involved with international students. We have U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, which includes the Student and Exchange Visitor Program, or SEVP, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, and U.S. Customs and Border Protection, or CBP. Beyond DHS, we work closely with the Department of State on visa issuance and oversight of exchange programs. OIE works across DHS and with our federal partners to support and bring visibility to their programs and projects, as well as coordinate on a number of initiatives aimed at improving international student policies and processes. Most of our work remains internal on international students, which is how we believe we are most effective for you and DHS. I wanted to share just a few examples in terms of how we have supported efforts or driven greater coordination among the DHS components. Hopefully most of you are familiar with the Study in the States website, which ICE SEVP manages for DHS. It was launched in 2011 to serve as a hub for international students to find information on the process to get here, understand the requirements, and to succeed in the U.S. The site's also designed to provide information to school officials on various international student policies and procedures. We supported the site's initial launch by helping clear internal hurdles and by securing support from senior leadership, which included having former Secretary Janet Napolitano announce the launch of the site during an event at the University of Wisconsin. That was in September of 2011. Since then, we've continued to support Study in the States by providing content to SEVP and helping coordinate content development across the department. And as part of this work, we arranged for Secretary Napolitano to film a video message in support of International Education Week in 2012. The video was the first of its kind from DHS, demonstrating its commitment to international student issues from the highest level. We've also worked with SEVP on other initiatives and helped secure approval for additions to the list of eligible STEM degrees for the 17-month extension of optional practical training. Next, just to touch on internal working groups. To support greater coordination with our partner agencies, we manage a monthly working group with representatives from DHS and the Departments of State, Education, and Commerce. We collaborate on process and policy changes, IT systems, modifications, communications, and outreach. We also run a biweekly working group within DHS specifically focused on international student issues. From that group, we supported the rollout of paperless I-94s, a major adjustment, as you all probably know, within the immigration process by coordinating conference calls, webinars, and web content prior to the change. And we also supported the response to the Boston Marathon bombing by helping coordinate efforts within DHS and assisting in the public affairs response regarding short-term changes to the entry process following the bombing. On a more routine basis, we share information on upcoming SEVIS releases to identify any potential process or communications needs, collaborate on conference participation and virtual outreach, and discuss planned policy changes. In terms of linking mission areas to enhance support. So finally, we use our position at headquarters to look across DHS and find non-traditional ways to link together mission areas related to international students. And the best example of this can be seen in the work we've done to help improve emergency preparedness at colleges and universities. Last year we launched the Campus Resilience Pilot Program, which is a joint effort of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, SEVP, and OAE. The program emphasizes the importance of FEMA's whole community approach to planning and resilience efforts and highlights the needs of various student populations, and in this case highlighted the needs of international students. Through the initiative, we have selected 7 pilot schools through a competitive process, and the schools hosted week-long campus-wide engagements to gather information that informed the development of a web-based tool for colleges and universities to use as they're doing their own preparedness planning. As part of the program, we linked ICE and FEMA to enhance the visibility of international students in emergency preparedness and response efforts on campus, with specific sessions during the campus engagements dedicated to the unique needs of international students. Also related to campus resilience, OAE was part of an interagency group to develop the White House Guide for developing high-quality emergency operations plans for institutions of higher education. Within the guide, we were able to get an insertion of a special section called A Closer Look at Incorporating International Students into Emergency Operations Plans. Those initiatives and the connections we made between emergency preparedness and international students highlight the benefits of having a headquarters-level office to identify strategic opportunities across the department. Next slide, please. So I hope that brief overview gave you a better sense of who we are and what we do. Now I'd like to discuss what is perhaps our primary academic engagement initiative, the Homeland Security Academic Advisory Council, or the HSAAC, as you know. Much of OAE's work and direct interaction with the academic community comes from the HSAAC, which we established in 2012. It's a federal advisory committee made up of a diverse group of 20 college and university presidents and National Association leaders, including NAFSA Executive Director and CEO, Ms. Marlene Johnson. The HSAAC is charged with advising the Secretary and DHS senior leadership on matters related to the academic community. And within it, there are 6 subcommittees, including the one focused on international students. But before I talk more specifically about that subcommittee, I want to mention a few key points about the HSAAC as a whole. Since 2012, the HSAAC has adopted a total of 108 recommendations across 6 subcommittees.
I'm bragging here, group.
A lot of recommendations, many of which are being actively implemented by the department. To date, and we track these, I'll tell you, to date, the department is implementing or has completed implementation of over 60% of the HSAAC's recommendations. Earlier this year, the charter was renewed by Secretary Jay Johnson to continue its operations through 2016, demonstrating our new Secretary's commitment to the academic community. We hold 2 to 3 full council meetings per year, all of which are open to the public. Each full council meeting is announced via a Federal Register notice and on the HSAAC page on dhs.gov, and we welcome your participation if you happen to be in the D.C. area. And we do have quite a good following of members of the public. Our next meeting is scheduled for October 22nd, and so I hope to see some of you there. So now I want to shift our focus and speak specifically about the Subcommittee on International Students. The slide you see now provides a full list of current subcommittee members. I wanted to specifically note that Ed Romatowski, who's Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Visa Services at the Department of State, is an active member of the subcommittee, and he contributes to subcommittee discussions and at our full council meetings in a non-voting ex officio capacity. We felt it was important to have the Department of State represented on the council and the subcommittee to be sure they have a voice in the conversation, particularly if and when members raise questions regarding the visa process. The Subcommittee on International Students has 3 taskings from the Secretary. 1, how DHS can improve its international student processes and outreach efforts. 2, how we can better communicate our regulatory interpretations, policies, and procedures to the academic community. And 3, how we can accommodate and support emerging trends in international education. Examples of recent issues discussed by the subcommittee include international student training for DHS officials, port of entry procedures, customer service initiatives, and CVIS enhancements. Within its 3 taskings, the Subcommittee on International Students has delivered 30 recommendations to the full council, all of which have been formally adopted. And of these recommendations, 17% have already been fully implemented by the department and 40% have been partially implemented. These recommendations have been incredibly helpful for the department, and I just want to highlight a few specific examples. We have seen recent proposed regulatory changes to increase the number of designated school officials per school, international student advisors, and to allow for less than full-time study by spouses of international students. SEVP and USCIS started publishing draft guidance for public comment before issuing final guidance, and to date, SEVP has published 12 pieces of draft guidance with more on the way, and USCIS continues to publish volumes of its policy manual. To increase engagement, USCIS, ICE, and CVP participated in more than 100 outreach events with the international student community in 2013. SEVP integrated standardized risk-based criteria to streamline all of its school adjudications, reducing certification time from approximately 270 to 60 days, and reducing its backlog of Form I-17 updates by 55%. And last year, SEVP published several tutorial videos, including one on completing the Form I-17 to bring more transparency to the certification process, which was accompanied by a fact sheet to further articulate process steps. So these are just a few examples of the work DHS is doing to implement HSAAC recommendations. You can find a full list of them along with updates on DHS progress online at the page we have linked to on this particular slide. Before I close, I want to emphasize that all the work we do, particularly in developing and implementing HSAAC recommendations, is not done alone. We work closely with and rely on the expertise of our component agencies and, of course, our HSAAC members. SEVP in particular is a key partner of OAE, and I speak frequently with the SEVP Director, Lou Farrell, to discuss and coordinate issues. ICE, USCIS, and CBP all participate in HSAAC meetings and are working daily to make ongoing improvements that support international education while maintaining the integrity of the international student process. The Department takes the work of the HSAAC seriously and has made a commitment to following through on its recommendations, and we're excited to be a part of those efforts. So we look forward to continuing our work with the HSAAC in the coming year as the Subcommittee on International Students plans to address issues related to trends in international education and additional regulatory reforms. Finally, I encourage each of you to visit Study in the States, follow them on Twitter, and like them on Facebook. We're constantly pushing out new information through social media and want to engage with you and get your feedback to make the site even better. In closing, I want to thank you again for your time and interest in our office. I want to thank NAFSA, your Executive Director Johnson, and Steve Springer for your support in hosting us today and for making this possible. I hope this was helpful, and I'm happy to turn it back over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Lauren. Well, let me just do a couple of things. Let me first mention that we're about to start the Q&A, so please submit some questions through the chat function. We have a few questions that some of you kindly submitted in advance, so thank you for that, but we're happy to take questions now through the chat function. And so let me just mention now, turn this back to you as NAFSA members and say, how can you provide input to our HSAAC process? And you may remember that we've done a few calls for your input, and I want to do that again today. So in 2012, we drafted our list of regulatory practice liaison and advocacy priorities. It's on our website, and I apologize for that strange-looking link, but you can easily find it either when you look at these slides on the website, or if you just want to search our site for DHS priorities, it's the first thing that comes up. And that was put together based on your input and our ongoing liaison with the Department of Homeland Security. You know, we have good active liaison with SEVP, with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, with USCIS, and so, you know, we had already had a good feeling, I think, for a lot of the issues that were in the forefronts of your minds, and so we based on that, we circled back out to you again to ask for input, and we take input anytime you want to give it to us. Please put it into IssueNet. If you will go to the Report an Issue function of IssueNet, that's really helpful for us. We, NAFSA staff and leaders review it every week, and we will pull out of there your input and use it. So please do that. It's a great place for us to keep a record of it as well. And so this has informed Marlene's participation on HSAAC. HSAAC has been a great vehicle for us to do something a little different than the standard liaison that we do with the agencies. I mean, this is a whole new sort of a whole new world to have Lauren and the sort of the level of the interest of the agency, the attention of the agency at the secretary's level, interested in some of our issues. So we think it's important. It's hard work, but we think it's fulfilling work, and it's been great so far. So we look forward to having more input from you. And with that, we will open it up for Q&A. If you have a question for Lauren Kilsmeyer about the Office of Academic Engagement and things related to that, please feel free to enter it now in the chat box. Do you want to, Lauren, maybe,
Sure.
While we wait to see if people have questions, maybe we've told them everything they could imagine they wanted to know about Office of Academic Engagement. I sort of doubt it, but while people are thinking about this, if you want to maybe refer to some of the pre-submitted questions.
Sure. We did receive some questions in advance that you all submitted. The first one reads, what is your relationship to SEVP, or how do you work with SEVP? So as I mentioned, we do work very closely with SEVP, probably more on a regular basis than any other component within the department. They, of course, are within ICE, and we're at headquarters, so we're not co-located. But because of the issues that they're seeing that they pass along to us, and vice versa, when we hear things that they may not be aware of, we're just in constant touch about what we're hearing and how we can help them perhaps elevate the visibility of a certain issue. So it's very much of a dialogue daily with SEVP. We also have a standing, coordination call with them, so we're constantly in touch with them. Okay. Do you want me to look at the chat?
Sure.
Or?
As you wish.
So we had a question in the chat. Are the notes for the HSAAC meetings posted somewhere? Yes. They are posted on the dhs.gov website. I believe we included a link to that specific site within the slides that for this presentation. Yeah, slide number 4. We provided a link. And if you go there, you can see the council's charter, you can see the membership, all of the meeting notes. Because it's a federal advisory committee, under the Federal Advisory Committee Act, there are certain requirements that we have to meet. The whole purpose of these types of committees is to increase the transparency into government activities and government work and really allow the public to participate. That was the intent behind the act when Congress passed it. And so we are required to, as I mentioned earlier, post notice of the meetings in the Federal Register, and then any materials that the full council considers as they're deliberating or agendas or issue papers that the full council is receiving, we are required to make those also available to the public. So you will see lengthy meeting packets on that website, including the notes for for the meetings and progress reports for the subcommittees and the full recommendations and the transmittal letters from the council to the secretary. So it's a lot of stuff. If you have time to go look at that, since 2012, there's a lot there. Can you discuss some of the future initiatives of your office as they pertain to international students? Looking at the next question in the chat. We actually are really excited about the Campus Resilience pilot program. We are hoping to do another phase 2 of that program, and I did mention that briefly in my remarks, but we would like to be able to kind of spread that process out to more schools, or scale it out to more schools, so that schools are improving their preparedness plans, their emergency preparedness plans, and specifically including preparedness efforts related to international students. And that was a key insert into the pilot program, was that the specific needs of international students. So we're hoping to scale that out, that program out, so that more schools can participate. And hopefully through that process, what you might be able to see is that your emergency planning efforts within your campus, your emergency management folks, your campus law enforcement folks will perhaps be more familiar with the work that you do with international students, and may come to you when they have questions about various issues that come up. Because what we have heard is that a lot of those folks on campuses may not be as connected to international, to the DSOs and the International Student Services offices. So we're hoping that helps. Okay, there was a question from Sarah S. There was a mention of student spouses having the ability to study part-time in the future. Would this be an initiative for F2s to pursue a degree? I think
that was also a pre-submitted question about, this was a proposed rule. It's been quite a while back that it was proposed, and so it was a very welcomed, wonderful rule for our community, which it would expand the number of DSOs that a campus would be allowed to have, and it would allow part-time study for dependent spouses and children of F1 students. And so I think we all, anytime we have a meeting with DHS, we always ask, is there any progress? Is there anything new that you can tell us? I know it was out for comment, and then it went back to the Office of Management and Budget.
Right, and so the final rule is being reviewed within the department. I don't have specifics on the timeline. As you know, these things can take a while sometimes. And I can't really speak to the pursuing a degree question. I don't know if that would be in a reg or would need to be in a reg, but we'll definitely take that back. Let's see. Other questions. There's a pre-submitted question. Would you consider expanding the HSAAC's International Student Subcommittee to include scholars, foreign faculty, and researchers? They are critical to the work of. So we do think about that often. We haven't included scholars primarily because DHS doesn't have the authority to make changes to scholar policies. That's under the Department of State, but we do, obviously, because scholars are included in CVIS and because SCVP is working closely with state on these issues. I mean, we're definitely interested and, would coordinate on those kinds of things. Is there a place online we can find an organizational structure chart for these acronyms and their relations? That's a great question. There is, if you go to the Department of Homeland Security's website, which is dhs.gov, there is a very, high-level overview org chart of the Department of Homeland Security, which was formed after 9/11, and you can see that we have under the DHS umbrella, we have the 7 major operating, what we call components, which include the former immigration bureaus, which were part of the INS, or Immigration Naturalization Service. So that's, as we mentioned before, USCIS, CBP, and ICE. And then you have FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. You have the Secret Service. You have TSA, and you have the Coast Guard. So those are the large operational components that make up DHS. And then there are a number of smaller ones that are headquarters-based. But yes, you can find that information on dhs.gov, and then each of those components has its own section where you can read more about what they do as well, and their org charts. So it is definitely a large, expansive, complex agency.
And the NAFSA Advisor's Manual is another obvious place to go for all things about all agencies, and definitely for acronyms as well.
Great.
Lauren, I see some questions coming in on, F2 work authorization, will that ever be a possibility? And H4 work authorization. And if you don't mind, I'll just jump in and mention that, the department's got a nice proposed rule out there for us that would allow certain H4s work authorization. And to just cut that short, it would be H4s that are in the green card process that would be allowed to work. And, this is something we always, as NAFSA, want to ask about and, advocate for. And I think for a lot of our members, it's primarily a tool for spouses to keep their professional skills up while they're here with another spouse who are in school. Even more important sometimes than the financial reward they would get. Just being able to keep their professional skills up to date by doing some work in the U.S. would be helpful to them.
Great.
So I don't know if there are plans. I know that is a difficult task. To any time to try to get additional work authorization for a non-immigrant classification. But it is something that we've brought up in the HSAAC scenario and something that we'll keep looking at closely.
Sure, and I would add that when we look at the various recommendations that the HSAAC has adopted and then formally submitted to the department, the regulatory recommendations related to regulatory change those are the big heavy lifts, and definitely challenging when you look at how easy, how hard are these going to be, and particularly if you have changes that require interagency coordination, concurrence, that type of thing. So, and they don't tend to move as swiftly as sometimes we would hope. So.
Yeah, understood. And I would mention that when we were given this opportunity, when Marlene was given the opportunity to participate in HSAAC, obviously we had years of pent-up ideas of things that needed to be changed. So we came ready with a big, huge, long list of things that needed to be done. So I think we have to be patient while they're worked on.
Yes, but I will say that to bring those to the full council with the diverse group that we have, with some of the presidents, the university presidents, and other association leaders who may not be as familiar with the specific details, I think has been of tremendous value and has really helped educate and bring the level of expertise up quite a bit within the council itself. And then you consider that this whole process is conducted in the public setting, so you really are able to, I think, push the message and the agenda out even further, which is very positive. So, okay. There was a question on, can you share your views on the GAO report on OPT? This is the optional practical training. I am familiar with the report. I'm not probably as familiar as you all are, but I know that within the department we have taken that report very seriously in terms of our figuring out how to respond to those recommendations. So that's sort of where we are.
Yeah, thanks. And sorry to keep butting in, but I would also just add that this is something that's very much on the minds of the folks at SEVP, and so we are talking with them a lot about that and trying to, sort out some of the nuances of that. So ongoing discussion about the GAO report.
Sure.
And I guess I would say the same thing, by the way, about the field reps. I don't know if you want to mention those, but that's something. That's an SEVP project. SEVP has been actively hiring. I know they've hired some of our members. We're both, sad to see them go and very happy that SEVP is hiring such qualified former DSOs. But I know they're going to do a three-part process, is my recollection, to hire the whole 60 staff. They're well into that process, and we'll keep putting out updates when we hear from them. We're having a lot of liaison and discussions with SEVP about how they're going to be used in the field and so forth. So that's another ongoing discussion.
Okay. Maybe I could talk just for a minute about another question that was submitted. Can you speak generally about what happens with the HSAAC recommendations? What happens is the recommendations are drafted within the subcommittees, and then the subcommittees bring them to the full council, where the full council has conversation and deliberation on the draft recommendations. Sometimes the full members of the full council will suggest amendments or edits to those draft recommendations, but then the full council formally, I should mention, before the full council votes to adopt a recommendation, we do allow a public comment period so that members of the public who have attended the meeting can address the council and, share their views and perhaps address recommendations that are under discussion. But following that, the full council does then vote and formally adopts the recommendations. And then what we do in my office is we transmit those recommendations in the form of a letter from the council's chair to the secretary, who then has that formal transmittal letter. And the way that we've sort of issued a response to the council is when we've had the Secretary of Homeland Security attend the council meetings, which we had former Secretary Napolitano attend several. And we do expect Secretary Johnson to attend our upcoming meeting in October. The Secretary will then speak to the full council about the recommendations and generally has given a verbal report to the full council in terms of their recommendations and how the department is either planning to implement or has already implemented those recommendations. And then we track them all in my office, so we're keeping a very detailed kind of accounting of where those are in the process. Okay. Looking at more questions in the chat.
I see some questions coming in about how much your office can influence staffing, processing times. Maybe that would be staffing and resources would be a way to call that at SEVP or USCIS, so that that we're not, if we're seeing slow processing times, and it seems like more staffing would help. Can you have any influence over that?
Yes, I will say that we actually, that did come to our attention in the subcommittee, in one of our subcommittees, and the subcommittee determined that we should formally draft a recommendation for the full council to consider around this very issue, and it was adopted. And so as the council has been in an existence over the last couple of years, it took us a little while to get on folks' radar, but they really, the work of the council, people within the department really do listen and watch the work of the council. And so when they do see a recommendation that's specific to them, they do pay attention, and it does have an impact. So I would encourage you as much as you can to definitely share your views where you can, either if you interact with the council yourself in the meetings. You can also submit comments to the council in writing ahead of the meetings, and we're required under the Federal Advisory Committee Act to share those comments with the council members. So we invite your comment in that manner as well. But just know that we are, it does make a difference, definitely. Okay. Let's see. Recommendation 1 regarding clear and reasonable adjudication criteria. USCIS states they will publish an adjudicator's handbook. Any updates on this? Just looking at the question from Casey in the chat. I'm not familiar with USCIS publishing an adjudicator's handbook. I do know that they have been working on their policy manual online, which is an online manual, but I'm not sure if it's going to take the form of an adjudicator's handbook. So.
Yeah, and by the way, that's, when USCIS puts out a section of that, they put it out for public comment. There haven't been a whole lot that have been sort of student and scholar focused yet, but obviously they're coming, sections on the I-539 or I-765. So we'll put out notice when those happen. And I might also add that, it's probably a good time to thank Lauren and her staff for the we had, and SEVP staff, we had asked for years for them to put out guidance in draft form before it is implemented so that we could have a chance to comment on it. And we thought it would be helpful for us and for them. And to their credit, they have said it's been very helpful. They do now issue this guidance in draft form. They issue it for 45 days. And what that guidance is actually going to be is an adjudicator's manual. So if you're interested in what SEVP is doing about an adjudicator's manual, that's the draft guidance you're seeing. And there's one piece out right now that I think your comments are due Monday on about conditional admission. So keep an eye on that. And for the question about this complicated issue about regulation versus guidance, I'll see if Lauren has any ideas about that. But this is something that my colleague David and I here at NAFSA think a lot about. And especially when we write a comment letter, that sometimes that's been our comment, has been that this is an area in which it shouldn't be guidance, it should be a regulation. And there's a lot. I mean, there are books written by law professors about this, but I'll just say the sort of a quick and dirty version of this is I think an agency has a right to issue guidance that explains a regulation, explains their approach to a regulation, et cetera, but not necessarily to create a whole new, a new law basically by issuing guidance. And so that's the balance here. And when we see that happening, that we think an agency is overstepping, we're going to comment about that. We're going to take it up in liaison. And if you think that that's happening with SEVP's policy guidance, be sure to put that in your comments to them.
Yeah, I would echo what Steve said because, as you mentioned, there's a lot of different interpretations about what should be guidance and what should be in a reg. I know that working within these agencies that it's debated heavily because people want to do the right thing. I mean, and when you're going the regulatory route, it just takes so much longer. So sometimes folks will say, well, can we do it the guidance route? And then, there's a debate about that as well. So I would just echo what Steve said about when you see something, definitely comment on it because we do listen.
Yeah, and as all you NAFSANs know, there are lots of times that we don't like some guidance or we didn't ask for it and wish it hadn't happened. And there are lots of other times that we really want some guidance and we get it and it's very helpful. So, it's a bit of a complex situation.
Okay, the question from Scott, are there openings in HSAAC membership coming up in the future? Is there a way to recommend that DHS consider a specific president or chancellor? I would say that the council membership, there are 2, 3, and 4-year staggered terms for the members. So there are definitely folks kind of coming in and cycling off on a regular basis. So I would encourage, and in terms of is there a way to recommend? Definitely, if your government relations person knows that your president or chancellor is interested, it's just helpful to get in touch with me and let me know that. We've had people on the council who have indicated interest in that way and who we've appointed. It is a somewhat lengthy process, as you might imagine, to be appointed because technically the Secretary of Homeland Security appoints the members. But our office, obviously, we play a role, and we are sort of the liaison and the eyes and ears. So if we're hearing of someone's interest and can advocate for that individual, we're happy to do so. So I would just encourage you to, if your president or chancellor is interested, just to let us know. Okay. Let's see what other questions we might have.
We have about 7 or 8 minutes. If people have any other questions, please keep typing them in. And I don't know if there are any other pre-submitted questions that you want to answer. We may have covered them all.
Yeah, we covered a lot of these. has the agency, one of the pre-submitted questions, has the agency considered expanding the list of STEM degrees eligible for STEM extension of optional practical training? The list of STEM degrees was sort of intended to be a living document that is subject to change. I don't have an exact timeline for updates, but we can take that back. We hear that question a lot. When are you going to add more to the list? So, okay. Any other questions in the chat? Here's another pre-submitted question. Do you see and or encourage interagency and intra-agency coordination on policies and processes that affect students in schools? Absolutely. That's a lot of what we do is connect the dots within the department and across the government. When we hear of something occurring that might have an impact somewhere else, we try to talk with the folks that we know, and we have, as I mentioned, regular sort of formalized interaction with our partners, regular meetings, regular calls, so that we hope to catch these things before they turn into a situation where you're surprised by something. We don't want that to happen. So.
Okay, so, thanks everybody again for all your good questions today and for participating. I guess we'll wrap it up now. And let me just remind you that if you join late, we will post the slides, and we have recorded this presentation, and we'll put it up later so that I know a lot of people are involved in international student orientation right now. So those of you who are taking a break from that, thank you very much for joining us. And to your colleagues who couldn't make it, let them know that this will be posted on the website so they can see it later. And again, let me just encourage you to, if you think of things that you would like for Marlene to take up in her work on the Homeland Security Academic Advisory Council, please submit it to IssueNet. Again, I guarantee you that NAFSA staff and NAFSA leader groups review it every week. We'll be looking forward to having your input. We'll pull it out of there and keep it in mind for our priorities. And Lauren, thank you very much for joining us today, and thanks everybody for participating.
Thanks very much, Steve, for hosting, and to Marlene and everyone else at NAFSA, and particularly for your active involvement on the HSAAC. I mean, you are fantastic members, and we really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone on the phone today who joined.
Thanks.